and welcome to The Apex, a weekly conversation with the titans and tastemakers of the automotive world. Now, if you've driven a consumer automobile in the last 20 years or argued about the aesthetics and purpose of modern motor cars with friends, you've been engaging with the world of our guest this week, automotive designer Chris Bangle. Having started his career at Opel and Fiat, in 1992, Chris was named the first American Chief of Design at BMW, and over the next 17 years went on to carve a legacy of distinctive sculptural designs which set out a new paradigm for the premium car segment. Today he is Managing Director of Chris Bangle Associates, a design studio in the Piemonte Region of Italy, and earlier this year was awarded the 2021 American Prize for Design. Suffice to say, we are thrilled to have him on the show. Chris, welcome to the Apex.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, Hector.
So my first question is, what were your early car experiences and what led you to become a car designer?
Well, that was a while ago, wasn't it? My father actually gave me a record once when I was about 5, I think. It was, these are, disc records that they used to have made out of vinyl. And it was sounds of the Watkins Glen Grand Prix. So basically, you had this album of nothing but race cars going by as they were in early '60s. And some announcer saying, "Oh, there's Phil Hill here behind you. Sterling Moss coming around the edge," all kinds of stuff like that. So somehow that combined with like a slot car set. These are these like cut out of Bond things, that they used to have as kids, and really got me into this idea of cars. And so kind of as a little kid, you tried to draw cars and things like this. Later, I found out there was actually like you could go to school and learn that sort of stuff. But that took quite a while.
That's interesting. And when did you make the decision to actually go to design school? Were there a number of things that you wanted to do, or was it, I wanted to design cars from the moment that, I knew what one was?
No, it wasn't like that at all. I like technical drawing. Actually, when I was younger, I did a lot of calligraphy because at the church I was given the job of lettering the Bibles when they gave them out for communion. You were given when you arrive at a certain age and you get your first communion and you get a Bible. And so I put people's names in it with this kind of old Germanic script. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And that got me into this whole idea of typography. I went to a high school that had a typography department in the high school. I actually ran printing presses there.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's fantastic because here nowadays, these presses are still in use, and you see these things, these ancient Heidelbergs, right? And you can talk to people about them. They're amazed that this American actually had experience on these things. Anyway, this high school was a very good one in Wausau, Wisconsin, for this sort of practical experiences. And they got me into drafting and understanding technical drawings. They gave me a summer job where I worked as a technical draftsman when I was about 17 or something like that. But at that time, I thought I would go into the priesthood and become a minister. So I went to a local version of our state college. It's a community area of the state college. It was very good. But in that time period, then I discovered that a college called Art Center existed, which I didn't know anything about. And they could teach me how to paint the box covers on model boxes. That's what I thought was like the ultimate. Like you could paint those pictures of battleships and airplanes and cars and make model cars, basically. I had like no vision beyond that. Once I got to Art Center, I did a portfolio with just car drawings. They accepted me amazingly enough. Then I discovered, there's people who really take cars seriously and they know all about this sort of stuff. And I had roommates who were really good at teaching me sorts of things. And I learned all about these greats of car design I knew nothing about. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow. So that's quite a distinctive kind of route into it, and actually leads me to the next question, which was, so which designers have had the greatest influence on you, and what did you like about them? I was going to ask whether you kind of used to idolize people like Marcello Gandini or Bertoni, or, have there been others that have influenced you from further afield, maybe from architecture or other kinds of technical disciplines?
Well, I mean, it's a super long list, so I doubt I could ever be anything other than make mistakes by leaving somebody out. Greats like Gandini and Giugiaro, they go beyond mentioning that these are fantastic people that I've always referred to. And I've had the pleasure of met both gentlemen, and they're really fantastic people too. But Sid Mead was, who passed away just a little over a
Mm-hmm.
year ago, was to me one of the really, I think, real great influences in my life. Once I got to know about him at Art Center and got to know him personally as well,
Mm.
and to see a futurist at work as a car designer, I think was a wonderful thing. It let me know that there's a concept of future out there that is different than the concept of same as yesterday with a different curve on it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
this is I think an important thing for me. When you go into the fields of architecture and things like that, very influenced by the writings of Robert Venturi
Mm.
and his kind. So I don't know. I couldn't even put the list on. I'm really not good at remembering names and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I would say, however, that Sir Kenneth Clarke, who wrote the book The Nude, that one book has probably influenced me more on car design than any other book. That
Mm-hmm.
one book by Sir Kenneth Clarke. And it has nothing to do with cars. But if you take the word nude out of it, because it's all about the nude as a artistic and sculptural theme. If you take that word out and you put the word car in, the entire book is dead on. So it's quite interesting.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. So you were appointed head of design at BMW in 1992, and you stayed there for the best part of 2 decades. I know that you began your career after you left your studies at Opel and then Fiat. But at BMW, what were the highlights of your time there, and what were your greatest challenges?
Well, I mean, the greatest challenge is coming into something which is a culture, a car design culture,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that it's not a static thing, it has to evolve,
Mm.
and you play a role in that, but the people there are really what makes it happen. So I would say that the greatest challenge is try to understand how that entire mechanism should work and
Mm-hmm.
can work, and help it achieve things that it previously didn't think was possible,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time keep the people engaged and make them feel that they too are achieving things they didn't think were possible,
Mm-hmm.
and every once in a while surprising everybody with what comes out in a manner which you're proud of, and it helps the company. So that isn't a very easy way to do it. There were certainly a number of points along the way where we thought, holy cow, we're really pushing a lot of water uphill here, but they paid off, and I'm very happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice. When I got there, the team had been over 2 years, I think, without a design director,
Oh, really?
and that's a long time without a particular type of leader in that particular role.
Mm.
And many times I've talked to people about flat hierarchies and way management structures could work and should work, and you realize that there are roles for leadership which are very, let's say in a creative world in any case,
Mm-hmm.
are very important to give focus to a team as opposed
Mm.
to direction.
Mm.
And that's something that it was a job I had to learn and fit into as my time there.
Mm.
But I think the background that I had, which was extremely mixed, and didn't come from this background of, let's say, car fanatic.
Mm.
The thing is, my first love is car design, not necessarily cars.
Mm.
And I at one time I can remember I had this guy. Excuse me for going off on a tangent here, but I had this one guy told me, how did you get this job? Since you don't have like 10 million model cars in your
Yeah.
walls, you're not rebuilding a Ferrari in your laboratory. Like
Yeah.
what the hell? How'd you get this job? Right?
Who are you?
and and I can remember telling him that there's moments when you want someone who is uh, seriously dedicated to the minutiae of what is the car in its historical consequences,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore you really really need those guys who have the 10,000 model cars on their shelves, and
Yeah.
they can recite every Ferrari that's ever been. And I mean, I've been with people, there are people like Joji Nagashima, who's
Mm-hmm.
still at BMW, I think. And in my day, if you asked Joji, could you, by the way, just sketch the entire history of the automobile for you? And he would do that on a piece of paper, and he could sketch literally every automobile that had ever been produced, right?
Wow.
So you need people like that who have this intimate knowledge and connection to the history of car design and the
Mm-hmm.
product in that sense, right? But you also need people who can stand above that and look at it from a macro perspective and see this as a different type of phenomenon at work.
Mm.
And I think that was my role at BMW, to be able to do that. And probably my particular background helped me in that.
And it feels like it was, it's an interesting thing that you mentioned there, that kind of balance between, if you put a purely car person in charge of a company that's making consumer automobiles for, let's face it, customers who not all of them are actually car people at all, you need some sort of balance there.
Well, this is, one of my critiques about the car design education is it's like car guys teaching car guys how to be exactly like they were. And to me, it's very, very difficult to move a culture forward. And it's something that I've written about and something that I've talked about with a lot of students as well. And you need a different kind of mindset in this whole thing to drive it forward, which could explain why it's not really driving forward right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, what is your take on the state of car design language today? And I'm asking that question from a perspective of maybe explaining to our listeners who, might see something like, the way that the Lexus front grills are now becoming so enormous that they're going to take over the entire car, or BMW have had this design revamp recently. Opinions differ on it. How does that come into production and why?
Well, what a culture kind of artistic culture kind of feels like it's done everything, then it just regurgitates in and on itself. This happened in the arts and architecture with Mannerism, which was basically this idea that Michelangelo had done everything. He was so huge. He was a giant of art. He was a giant of architecture. That he could paint, he could sculpt, he could design buildings and everything. And so it's as if in the wake of this one guy, the whole artistic force suddenly decided, okay, it doesn't get any better than that. All we could do is just take what he did and kind of skew with it.
Yeah.
And so you wind up with all these bizarre distortions and permeations on architecture and art. We're talking about like the paintings like the Madonna, the long neck, and we're talking about the architectural buildings where they're basically, the joke is totally inside joke. They're because it's architecture for architects making a joke about architecture, which is kind of car design today. It's car designers doing a joke about car design just for car designers, and it's not moving this thing forward. It's manneristically treading water.
So is this the kind of thing where you've got more and more complex folds, curves, CAD design lines that kind of they can be there. If they weren't, no one would really notice. Kind of strange exhaust ports, little bits of chrome trim that you don't really understand why they're there. Is it that sort of thing, or is it a more kind of fundamental difficulty that people have in moving away from certain kinds of paradigms?
Well, it's both of these actually, and you did a pretty good analysis of it right there. Thank you. I don't think I could say it better than that.
We tried to do our research.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with this trope that is trotted out at every occasion. So we don't want to scare the customers. Okay, that's the first one. All right, so you put that on one end of the playing field, and on the other end of the playing field, you say, oh, but it has to be, I guess, aerodynamic and makeable by suppliers who can only make what they've made before, and blah, 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 So the real form follows process arguments. And as long as those two things form this sort of cage around it, then within that, the car designers add their own cages in their own minds because they don't want to scare themselves first. I mean, have you ever seen anybody draw a drawing that scares themselves? It just doesn't happen, right? So it just becomes this continuous loop of, okay, it's exactly before, but now, as you say, I'll add a little more chrome slop there, and I'll stretch some of these graphics out beyond, whatever, the good Lord intended them to be. Okay. Many people, however, don't realize that things like giant grills are actually masking a whole set of fundamental functional problems, as car designers have to wrestle with all kinds of sensors and cameras and detector systems and all kinds of this crap, which all wants to be exactly in the middle of the car so it gets the best picture. And they just don't know how to deal with this stuff. So what do? They just, make the grills bigger and bigger, I guess.
Make the grills a design feature. It's quite funny when you mention suppliers as well. I always think of, you see all the blurb in the in the leaflets and so on you get at trade shows about radical engineering pushing the limits of design, but it sounds like on some of these projects the answer is, but not today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bunch of crap. As is well known, form follows suppliers.
Yeah.
Okay. If they don't do it, It doesn't get done. And
Mm-hmm.
what do they say? Well, nobody asked us to do it, so we don't.
So that must be an eternal struggle in the mind, especially like a chief designer who's responsible for, I assume setting the yardsticks of where a particular line, a particular model is going to go in the future, where you'd like it to go. It sounds like there's a lot of practical steps that you need to overcome.
Well, yeah, yes, but most importantly, you have to have a kind of a mindset for this. There
Mm-hmm.
is a concept called Grundlogik, which is basic logic. Grundlogik. It
Mm-hmm.
means what is unsaid, which is taken for granted to the point where you don't even acknowledge it, and forms a background to whatever playing field you're dealing with in
Mm-hmm.
any field. This
Mm-hmm.
works in any field. And car design has got a Grundlogik behind it,
Mm-hmm.
which predefines things in our minds so that the muscle memory that designers carry with them anyway in their arms, that they always draw a car in the same way, et cetera, like that,
Mm-hmm.
winds up giving us all these same starting points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we had to do reds, as you know, this car
Mm-hmm.
is rather radical and unusual. One of the Grundlogik things that we challenged was, does it have to be a holistic object? Meaning, can you see it in one shot, grasp it in its entirety, and understand it? And we said, no. What happens if it isn't that? What happens if you cannot understand it at a first glance? We present it to you in layers, and every layer has a different story. And that's something which car design had basically never done before.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, speaking of car designers individually, with the growth of social media, 24/7 sort of PR, do you think it's actually more difficult these days to be a really progressive, radical designer in a large organization, in a large car manufacturer?
Well, I mean, the social media thing is actually pushing the car companies into this concept called design for Instagram.
Yeah.
Where they have to make their stuff look really peppy and sharp so that it gets that instantaneous like appeal and gets forwarded to somebody else, but after that, it doesn't really hook on to anything, which kind of has a little bit to do with the banality of all the supercars out there, that they're seemingly trying to fit into the exact same visual mold, which is being basically defined by shared visual mediums like that. On the other hand, that's not what I think is really holding back the car designers. The challenge within the companies is to understand the role of a progression of car design in their future success. They don't understand that, and so they don't think it's worthwhile. If somebody else does it, fine. Once that's been established, they can latch onto it and copy it and whatever else. But they don't understand that it's in their interests to invest in that, which is why this concept of design research is so banal.
That's interesting. And just a kind of a bit more philosophical question I had was, we've got these new technologies coming out, EV powertrains, of course, hybrid powertrains, all sorts of things like that. At the same time, it's kind of what we alluded to earlier. The car, it's a powerful cultural construct. Like, everyone knows or thinks they know what a car is and should be. So these two things come to a head. Do you think modern car design needs to change radically in order to make the best use of new technology? So I'm not just talking about the fact that you don't need to have a transmission tunnel and base the design of the car around that. I'm talking about more fundamental change for the kinds of cars that people use day to day, rather than, some sort of exotic hyper super car thing.
Well, I wouldn't actually start with the technology. I would start with real world of real people and what they do and how they would like their world to be, and work backwards from there. And I just give you an example. One of the Grundlogics of car design is we design cars from A to B. Okay, so is that true? I mean, in a world where, let's say, you're calling up an Uber or a Lyft or something like that, is the car's design important for you from the A to B, or could that be the decisive factor at A and at B? So, for instance, the transition area from I haven't gotten into the car to I'm getting into the car makes the difference between whether I pick let's say, for example, an Uber or a Lyft. Why? Because Lyft, for example, gives me the red carpet treatment of getting in and out of a car. Okay, that means when I arrive and when I depart, I look like a superstar. This is something that in BMW we learned from our experience with Harley when we were doing the cruiser motorcycle, that it took forever for us to get our heads around the idea that the difference between a BMW and a Harley Davidson motorcycle is a motorcycle is about from A to B because it's the world's best bike for the curves, etc. But the Harley is all about arriving and all about departing. And that's when people really, really make a show of the vehicles. Okay. So is that something that these technologies can help us do in a different manner because they allow us to rearrange things? I mean, if we start from that point of view, then we see where the technologies drop into place. It might be a way to give us a different approach.
So is that where your Reds project comes in? Maybe you could tell us a bit more about that quite radical design that I think you debuted in 2017, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's still an ongoing project. I mean, they're still dedicated to making it, which is, I mean, China's a little bit got isolated in the last year and a half from us. We have to admit, haven't been over there for a while. But the concept behind this was to put together two things: a very ecologically based EV vehicle that they wanted to have as a platform, with the particular needs of the megacity urban mobility of China, which has a lot about cars not moving. Okay, so we took this as the basis. Okay, what happens to the 90% of a time when a car is not moving, which it is statistically, it's like 90% of the time a car is not moving, and we made that the USP, the special selling point. We still make a car you can drive. I mean, the prototype we made's got over 1,000 kilometers on it. Drives fantastic. I mean, I've driven it all over the place, but it's when it's not moving that it does things that no car can do. Like allow you to flip the seat around and talk to people in the back seat without opening the doors and stuff like that. It turns out that for people in these megacity in environments, there's lots of times when they need that space for themselves. It's called the fourth space. It's not home or work or like a Starbucks, but it's your personal space. When we designed the car, though, around the space, so literally starting from the volumes that are required on the inside of the car, it winds up this thing is got a really weird spaceship sort of shape to it. And when we looked at it, we said, okay, if we keep it like that, it's just going to be a weird spaceshipy car. How can we sandwich this car within a car that when you first look at it, your first glance is, it looks like a normal car, but it looks like a car maybe a little kid drew. So that it looks cute and it has a sense of adorableness about it. And that leads you into it to the next step where you can actually look at and go, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. So just to make a long story short, we split a car on the y-axis, which basically had almost never been done before. By that, I mean, just really quickly for your listeners, the XYZ coordinates in car design, the X's are the length of the car and the Z's are the height of the car. And the Y is the width. So when you think of a 2-volume or a 3-volume, this is because you split the car on the Z-axis in different manners, right? You make an under platform and you make a block that sits on top of it. If you look at cars like a Model T is split on the X-axis. Everything from the firewall forward looks entirely different from the firewall back, right? Okay. But no car had ever been split on the width axis, where the sides are completely different than the part in the middle. So this is how we did it. We made the sides actually go contrary to the middle. The A-pillars on the sides slope, let's say, normally, but the front windshield actually slopes reverse to allow the steering wheel to get out of the way so you can flip the seat around. And this type of a split on the car is a different type of a design approach, which we'd never seen done in cars before. And that, I think, helped us get around this immediate rejection of the car as a sort of too much of a spaceship, and at least get it over this first hurdle of, is it a car or not? And in people's minds, when they see it, yeah, it is a car, but it's a car like a little kid would draw, which is, again, cute and approachable.
That's fascinating. And I think just to come to performance cars, I think in many enthusiast circles recently, there's I think you mentioned it before, kind of growing cynicism for hypercars and purely performance-led vehicles. So we've discussed the sort of mass transport issues and vehicles designed around that. What do you think designers of performance vehicles will have to do in the future to make their cars appealing? Do you think they need to make radical changes? Do you think they need to just churn out the same old stuff? Because for some companies, I think it might not be working as well as they'd hoped it would be. I wondered if you had any thoughts on it.
Well, I think in many ways, they don't understand how to create a performance vehicle around anything other than a few phenomenon like super jackrabbit acceleration or 400 kilometer an hour top end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if that's what it is, then some of the defining elements like aerodynamics, et cetera, are going to be there and unavoidable, and you have to deal with. But at the same time, maybe they don't have to be laid out like they always have been. And certainly the idea of active aerodynamics should be able to make these things a little bit less, let's say, predictable at the low end when they're, at under 120 kilometers an hour, which is when most people would see them, right? On the other hand, is that really what a supercar or a hypercar is all about? When I was younger, a supercar was something which was politically incorrect. If you looked at a Countach, okay, back in the 70s, okay, this was a car where you just said, what the, it was a what the kind of car. I mean, this is to me a Gandini masterpiece because he broke every possible rule in the book and gave us an icon. Okay. I mean, they even picked the word. I don't know if you know this, but in Piemonte, where we live, that word Countach actually means kind of like what the, it's how they would say that. Yeah. It's a very nice word for that.
Yeah.
Okay, but these cars are not trying to be politically incorrect. They're not violating anything like that. They're not going against any nature. They have one foot in the beauty contest world. Nobody ever went to a beauty contest for innovation. Right? And so, because that means you're already deciding I have to obey the standard canons and tropes and things like this. They're not challenging this at all. We won't even go into the list of things that they could do to make them somehow give us more food for thought, make us see our world differently. Okay, as it is the most, when you see these cars, you think what Oscar Wilde said when he saw Niagara Falls for the first time, and he said, it'd be more interesting if it went the other way.
That's a really brilliant way of capturing that. So just moving on from cars a bit, you've now got your own design house, Chris Bangle Associates. Can you tell us a bit about what you do now and your recent projects and how that all works?
Well, this is a design consultancy which works not just on cars but also on basically any type of classic products which are designed, and we've done everything here from bottles to super yachts. We even worked on a spaceship interior and all kinds of household appliances, from telephones, things like this. Recently, however, we have had clients who have been in, let's say, domestic appliances, things like this, who have really gotten into the fact that we kind of invented a design approach here called objectomy that gives us a different view on how to deal with them. And it works into cars as well. We're clear across the spectrum. Objectomy is actually getting into the mind of the object and considering it like a living thing. And once you do that, you begin to ask yourself, what does it want to do? What's its dreams? Things like this. How does it want to help you if we listen to it? That actually comes from car design, because car designers tend to talk to their cars as if they're living things. They ask themselves, how do you want to be dressed today? They consider a car able to reflect comfortableness with the lines you're giving it, just like a little kid is comfortable with the clothes the mom dresses it in or not. And by taking that approach and applying it into many other fields, we're able to open up a lot of doors in our minds in any case. And we show it to a customer, and you bring them to that. They see opportunities for their product and user scenarios, et cetera, that weren't there before. And this, of course, is a kind of a spill-off from the other side of the work we're doing, which is going into cartoons, which you probably also know about.
Well, I didn't actually. I didn't know about the cartoons. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I think that's a really interesting avenue.
Well, that's probably our best kept secret. Outside our studio here is a 4-meter tall sculpture of a giant walking triumphal arch. These triumphal arch like in Rome or in Paris or something like this. And this one is huge, right? Made of reinforced concrete. And he's taking a hike, and on it is written in Latin, every arch must earn its triumphs. And we made this sculpture after I brought back some drawings of walking architecture in Croatia on a visit I took there. And as we were building it, we asked questions about this. Who is he? What's his name? Where's he going? Who's his friends? And that led us to create a whole world of cartoon characters called the inanimati, which are things that are alive. And we made a short film of it. You can find this online. Shira, about scissors, paper, rock fight. And we started our own little series of little mini podcasts called the Unboxing Series, where we try to explain how to make your own inanimati characters. So all this is leading towards taking Archie, our character out there, Archie Arch, and building him into a cartoon series for TV, which is what we're doing.
That's amazing. We'll definitely include the link to that for our petrol head readers as well. So Chris, we're coming up on time, so I just had a few quick fire questions to end with.
Sure.
The first one goes back to cars. What is your favorite current car design on the market? And if you don't like any of them, what was your favorite legacy car design?
This is the kind of thing. I like all cars, but I also don't like all cars.
Yeah.
So it's really unfair for me to say there's a particular car that I like or I don't like or anything like this. I'm driving an old X6. It's still like first generation because I just can't emotionally part with it. I just love this thing to death. I'm slowly getting my head around the idea of a new X6, but it's going to take me a little while. So things like that. I mean, I enjoy the routes that companies like Citroën and have taken with some of their products recently, and also Peugeot, which I've enjoyed how they've managed to expand some things in a particular way. I really respect how the Volkswagen guys managed to take some process changes in their stamping and turn out some razor sharp sheet metal. Unfortunately, they kind of overdid it. They applied it to everything. But okay, they have to learn to dial it in and out too and stuff. But I mean, it really shows you how a few process changes can give a really sharp new look to your company. And things like that. But I guess I'm waiting for the car design to show us that it belongs to this century and it belongs to the new world we live in. We don't live in a very simple world, and we don't live in a straightforward world, and we don't live in a world of easy answers. But our cars are trying ever more and more to be, let's say, palatable and less challenging and things which you don't have to think about, which might explain why people don't kind of care about them either.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. So my second question is, what is the most important skill a good designer should have?
The most important skill a good designer should have. Oh, wow. That's a very good one. Of all these different skill sets that you would tell people to have. Well, there's things like being critical and things about like being tenacious and all kinds of skills like that, I suppose you could add to the list. I think one that I always look for in designers is are you questioning? Do you ask questions? Or are you one who just accepts? Or is there something going on in your mind? A culture is measured on the questions it asks. I've heard that before, and I believe in that very strongly. And probably car designers don't ask enough questions. That could be one of the points.
Great. And last question. If you could have met one figure or meet one figure from automotive or design history for dinner, who would it be and why?
Oh, I'd give anything to have another dinner with Sid Mead, I'll tell you that.
Oh.
Endlessly entertaining gentleman. Endlessly entertaining. But I could say the same thing about other greats in design, like Chuck Jordan from America, who hired me out of Art Center and was truly a strong influence on my life as well. Fantastic guy. Or my first boss, Gordy Brown. There are too many figures like that exist in the past and things like that. You would love to know what it would be like to sit down next to a guy like Harley Earl and watch him at the dinner table. I wrote a book on car design once, and I tried to channel Harley Earl in writing it and make him one of the characters, right? It wasn't very easy, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, that's great. Well, Chris, on that note, thank you so much for your time today. That was a really fascinating chat, and thanks very much for a great interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Apex is powered by Custodian, a new platform for car enthusiasts designed to help you manage your car from anywhere. Using the latest technology, it takes the pain out of ownership and lets you just enjoy the drive, because Custodian will take care of the rest. So if you believe life starts after 6,000 RPM, you need to be on Custodian. Join us now at www.custodian.club to sign up for early access and get ready to enjoy your car like never before.